trees. But one comment on that with these designs is that we would have to do mitigation for those trees. I think it was 4-to-1. So we would be planting new trees in here within the site. So these are the buildings that remain: the chapel, the aquatic center, sports center. There's an architecture team that's working on these separately, and we're working on the park side of it. So they've already been through several meetings with the community and council to develop specific plans for renovating these facilities. So our work is really to the south of those buildings. And this was our design that we had come up with a few years ago. And many of these elements are in our new designs, but when we attain the arborist report, attain the site survey, this design really was going to be problematic to work with the site. The site has approximately 50 feet of elevation change from one side to another, and which is rather substantial. And if you put fields in that were proposed here being synthetic, they're on a very mild slope. It would take a very large amount of retaining walls to make this a success. So we talked to the city about developing or looking at other options to work with the terrain better. And that's what we did. The other component to this too was there were going to be a couple buildings that were going to remain, but the decision was made to remove the buildings because of the materials in them, and then rebuild potentially some buildings, which we have in option 1 in our designs. So for the park elements and what we're looking at, some of the designs have fields, and we're looking at the fields to be synthetic turf multi-use fields, like this picture up here. We do a lot of these fields. Close to here, we did the Catino field in Seaside. This one is Minnie and Lovey in San Francisco, but we've done several fields for San Francisco and the school district up there too. But the idea is that the whole field is set up to be synthetic, and then we basically throw on all the sports, that the community could desire. So here we have baseball with several different base distances. We have soccer. We have soccer for U14 and above, and then the smaller ones are also shown, which are maybe hard to see. We have lacrosse. I think we had rugby. And then in the far corner, we had another backstop too. But this allows you to play all kinds of sports. And the other thing that is being proposed is that in the designs for the fields, they should be lighted. And especially if you have synthetic field, you need to take advantage of it. And lighting these fields just can increase the use, especially before daylight savings, and in the wintertime out here. And this, obviously, we've been having a lot of rain too, and that's another thing, is that you pretty much can play on these, even if there has been a recent rain event. So the other item that's being included is what we call an all-inclusive playground, and the playground is shown in a couple different locations on our designs, but this will be Tatum's Garden, all-inclusive playground. I think some of you are familiar with the one that's in Salinas, and I believe this will be their second one, and they're looking at other ones too. But they would develop it, and the city would prep the site and probably run utilities to it. And but we're leaving space. We've had conversations with them about what they need for size, and that's what we're leaving in reserve for them. The other item that was included is an amphitheater, and we have a couple different sizes in here, but the amphitheaters can be used for community events, music in the park, movie nights, things like that. And with the terrain elevation that I was talking about, this type of program would work well to be able to be stepped into the slope. And some of the designs have it up in the southwest corner, which would work too very well. We have some courts in here. We have some tennis. We have pickleball. One of the things that we've been hearing is to separate tennis and pickleball, which we would recommend too. They don't get along very well, tennis and pickleball players. So we would recommend just separating it. I think it'll make that relationship better, shall we say. So the other thing that we've been looking at too in several parks are these multi-use courts, and they're gaining in popularity, and there's a lot of manufacturers making them, and they have lights, and they can be used for basketball, they can be used for futsal soccer, they can be used for like indoor soccer going off the boards, or roller hockey. You can also do temporary courts on them for tennis. We're looking at one in another city where we're looking at doing U6 and U8 courts on them, but they just provide a nice opportunity. They're all weather. You can do them in synthetic turf, but these are all hardscape with acrylic coating or painting on them. The other thing we were looking at is sand volleyball, and I think we have 1 or 2 courts in there. And then we'll have other items too, like picnic. Typically, we've been going with more bocce with a picnic. It's a relatively low cost item for a park. You know, in the past, we used to do horseshoes, but horseshoes has kind of been less popular, and bocce is more popular. So there's plenty of space for horseshoes or bocce, and we're looking at doing picnic around. And those types of things, along with site furnishings, will be included, you know, as the design evolves further. So I'll walk through our designs. I think I'm going to walk up there. Is that good? All right. So is that me doing that? All right, so we have 4 options, and the options increase in kind of the use as we go from option 1 to option 4. So option 1 has no fields. It's the one option that doesn't have any fields, but it has everything else that we're showing in the other designs, with the exception of the historic buildings and also the sports pavilion. So in the other designs, the sports pavilion is up here, and on this one it's here. Moving it provides more space for parking, and we'll talk about parking here in a minute. And the pavilion is intended to be the idea was that it would be a covered like roller hockey facility to take place or replace the hockey facility that exists in what's going to be now the sports center. Within the design, we have an inclusive playground, we have an amphitheater, we have tennis and pickleball, basketball, volleyball. We also have, in this concept, the historic buildings that would bring back the barracks. I forget what they call it. What's a kitchen called, or a canteen? PX is a store, right? I
heard people say galley. That's for the Navy. Mess hall.
Mess hall. Thank you. Mess hall. And then we have like a group picnic area here. We would also again have picnic areas around the terrain of the site. This is the high point here, and this is the low point down at the sports center, or the corner on 9th and 2nd Avenue. And so this is really where the terrain is, this area, and then along the side here too. The other thing that we're showing on this is the trees, and the darker trees are the legacy ones, and there were 6 of those. And then the other trees that are numbered are the other ones that are in the category of significant. So this design maintains all those. So the other important thing in all the designs you're doing too is the plan is to bring Fort Tag Trail to the site, and then have it go up the site and head west and head over to the intersection up here at 9th and what's going to be Ocean Bluff and Sand Dune. The 4-tag trail essentially is going to go right underneath 2nd Avenue with a tunnel and go to the other side. So that means that this trail is going to come out here about 18 feet or so below grade and have to ramp up. The other thing that the city asked us to do is make this an ADA compliant path, which will just increase the amount of run that we have to do. So essentially we get to grade about up here. So this will be one big ramp, a sloped area with walls or embankments. Essentially we'll get to here. And then the idea was to make this wide. The other designs, 3 and 4, have this even wider to make it a more significant promenade along that edge. We have a great lawn here. And then a lot of these areas were just left to be open. And because of the trees, the terrain would be very difficult to develop in some of those spaces. Parking wise, this parking here is really meant for this building component. And then the idea was that the park would use these additional parking components and then also use the on-street parking. And we show it in a summary one at the end, but we'll go through and recap what we think the parking demand would be at maximum use out here, just for these park elements here, and not including anything with the buildings.
Okay, good question. Can we hold questions until the commission has had a chance to comment?
All right, option 2. Option 2 has a lot of the same elements. It does not have the historic buildings in it. We do have one multi-use field in this design. It's basically a youth baseball, youth softball field, 200-foot type outfield. So that's pretty much 12-year-old boys, and for girls fast pitch, it can go up a bit in age from there. And then a full-size soccer field that could also be used for other sports, but it's a 75 by 120 field in yards, which is, pretty much the biggest field that you would want. So the other items, tennis, pickleball, we have some plazas, the beach and basketball is here, playgrounds here, amphitheaters up here, and then the Vista area. The other thing I didn't talk about in the last design is that we have some restrooms. So we have a restroom on the southern end, and one on the northern end. And then obviously these buildings would also have some restrooms. So we'll come back to the trees on the summary one. In this option, we do remove some of the trees and that are significant. And again, we would mitigate that. So the area on the site that is more level or flatter is this area in here, and where the buildings are too. And that makes the best location for the fields. And on this design, we have 2 fields, full-size soccer again, that also could fit other sports. And then we have a baseball and softball in one corner and a larger baseball and softball in the other corner. So we were saying 200 feet here, but this can definitely go up to be higher. And then the one in this corner could be used for pretty much everybody, any age group in baseball to adult. And then a softball could also be used for adult down there too. 4-tag trail is the same in all of them. The big thing too with option 3 and 4, as I mentioned earlier, is we have a bigger promenade here. And the idea there is that you have the trail going through there, and we're trying to minimize the conflict between the people using the trail that are traversing the site versus people that are like parking going into the park itself. And along Cannery Road, there's places where they just widen the area out to accommodate more room and give people more space. So essentially that's what we're doing in here. But this would also have some plazas, picnic, park benches. It'd be a nice civic space for events and and also, proximity to these buildings and all this activity as well. The other thing we were thinking on the ones with more fields is that we would have a concessions and a restroom here, and then we still have a restroom on the other side. With this location of the fields occurring here, we would move the inclusive playground up to this location. And that is, as I said, this southern side has more terrain change, but in a lot of these playgrounds that we do that are inclusive playgrounds, we're usually dealing with flatter sites, and we're building up the terrain to, get people to all the different levels. So we're kind of doing the opposite. Whereas here, we already have the terrain, and we would need to do retaining walls, but we would be able to, I think, use the terrain to gain access, have slides from one terrace to another, and those types of activities. We have tennis, pickleball here, basketball, volleyball, and then we did the amphitheater here. The amphitheater on options 3 and 4 is a little smaller. I think that, if there's a desire to do a bigger amphitheater, we could do that. That would be maybe closer to what we were showing in option 1 and 2. So option 4 really was the one that we started at from our original design to fit the program in and to see how we could include it with the terrain of the site as best we could. So we did a lot of different studies to come up with this, but this one really did remove the significant trees. We kept the legacy trees. All the designs have the legacy trees retained. But the big item with this is that removing these trees over here that were significant allows us to do a bigger parking lot because we can grade that area out and manipulate it. And so this design, our option 4, has the most parking. So everything else is pretty similar to what I just described in 3, but we had manipulated this design to create option 3. And so the elements are all fairly similar. So the summary slide just captures, first of all, the tree preservation level. So the first one and the second one retain all the significant trees and also the legacy. And then option 3 just kept the significant trees on the south side, and option 4 just kept the legacy trees. And then we quantified the trees that would be removed in this column. And then we calculated out what the mitigation would be for replacement trees. And there would be, in all the designs, a number of trees being added to this site. It's a very big site. Without the barracks being out there, we could easily add 100+ trees, in this park. And then we did a summary of the fields. So the first one has no fields. Second one has full-size soccer, youth baseball. The second one has full-size soccer, the third one has full-size soccer, 2 of them. Same with the fourth, and then youth baseball and older baseball and softball. And then retaining walls, essentially from option 1, option 4, you start with the least and you go to the most. And then the amphitheater, we were estimating in options 1 and 2 about a 250 person capacity, where 3 and 4 have an 80 person capacity. And then parking is 326 for the first 2 options, 304 for the third option, 349 for the fourth. And then we estimated out what the park demand is. And option 1 is 273, option 2 is 419, option 3 is 420, option 4 is 420 because they're the same. And then we estimated what the parking demand would be based on 75% of that. And you can see those numbers. So there is a difference in these designs in what the parking is available to what the demand is. And then option 1 also had the other items with the sports pavilion moving in, which takes up more room within the park area. And then also the historic buildings being added, where the other designs don't have that. So we had a community meeting at the end of July or January, and we had like an open house one actually right at the site there. This is the roller rink building that you can see there. And then so we did an open house where people could just pop in and discuss with us and ask questions. And then we did an evening presentation here in this room. So out of that, we handed out a what was it called? Comment cards. And then they provided comments on those cards and could email them in. And then they could also select an option. So out of that, this is the feedback. It was pretty, there were people that definitely focused on sports that were more interested in options, basically option 3. And then there were people more interested in some of the other park elements, and they were more interested in options 1 and 2. And so you can see the tallies there. And some other comments. The option 3 was preferred. There were people that liked option 4, but they would pick option 3 if they were asked to. The less inclined sports people prefer option 2, and that allows more space for other elements, other park elements, other uses out there. And then comments on 1, they like the lawn, they like the museum. And the other thing is that our estimate included the sports pavilion, which is about a $3 million price tag, whereas the other estimates did not, the other designs did not have that in there. And then the other thought too was that playground location on options 3 and 4 may be a little bit more difficult to topography, which could be true. But the other thing too there was that location that we showed in options 1 and 2 was a good location for the amphitheater, some people felt. So cost wise, we ran costs on several of the designs, and you can see what they're coming out to. And so it's not cheap. And this is a big park. These fields are expensive. Daniel and I are working on a field just like this in South San Francisco, and that one was about an $11 million project. So just doing the fields is a good portion of that amount there. And then we do have contingencies in there. So some of these are what we call like general conditions. And then we have a design contingency, which is for more evolution of the design. There's going to be things that we didn't think about when we set up the estimates. We have a bidding and inflation element in there that essentially allows us to say this is good for a year. And then we have construction contingency, which is for things in construction that come up, that create change orders. And we know there's things like asbestos pipe out here and some other things that may not be known that we're going to encounter just because of what was out here before. And then city construction management is just the services for the city to provide their CA work and geotech and testing. Yes.
So inevitably, the cost of maintenance comes up on these. As people see our parks, they know we're stretched for staffing as we are right now. But just as a general maintenance costs on this, we didn't break it down by options per se, but working with numbers on acreage and the amount of landscaping that's currently maintained by staff. Particular to this park, once this park goes into operation, we anticipate that we'll need an additional lead maintenance worker and a maintenance worker. And that's approximately $260,000 per year for salary and benefits to have them on staff. And then, there's obviously materials and equipment that goes into maintaining the parks on a regular basis as well. We estimate those at about $100,000 per year for a total of $360,000 per year. And that's kind of in line with a draft Parks implementation plan that when it was put together, estimated about 20,000 per acre. And we escalated that up slightly because it was an older report. But that's kind of the estimate that we have right now, but could be refined going forward as an option is selected by the city. So. We got one or two more slides coming here. Oh, next steps. And then I'll wrap them.
Okay. So we are presenting tonight to you, and then we're presenting next Tuesday night to City Council. And we hope to receive feedback to be able to move the design to one design, single preferred concept. We've already been working on estimates that I shared with you. And then we want to start to look at a grading plan and you know, figure out how we can implement this project as well.
Thank you, Derek. And as Derek said, you know, we're looking for input from the commission on these parks options. This will go to City Council next Tuesday. Ultimately, the final option decision will be by City Council. But whatever input comes from the commission and from the public here tonight will be summarized in a report going to City Council to help inform those decisions. And we anticipate there will be more public participation at that meeting as well. So with that, I'll open it up to the commissioners. If you have any questions of staff or the consultants that presented tonight.
Good evening. I have some questions. Can you give a little additional detail on the picnic space, what that entails or what that includes?
For any particular option, Commissioner Rowland, or just in general for picnic options throughout?
Just in general.
I'll ask our landscape architect to opine on that.
Yeah, the picnic areas would have obviously picnic tables. Sometimes we do surfacing underneath them that's like decomposed granite. And on some of these parks, we do barbecue units. And so those are included. Drinking fountains would be included. You know, sometimes if we're near a tree, we're not going to do a lot of work in the ground or paving work. We would we can do mulch in there, and then we can set tables on mulch. Also, we would have tables that are ADA compliant. So that follows kind of the same kind of ratio that you have in a parking lot for ADA spaces. So the idea is to have group picnic. Maybe there's some 3 or 4 that needs to be worked out, but then there'll also be places that are just kind of like individual tables where, you know, a family can just go and hang out.
Thank you. A picnic and people coming and partaking of all the different activities. No, we haven't mentioned anything about trash receptacles and how that would be handled.
Yeah, I made a comment about safe furnishings, and we would include those. They're not going to show up at this type of scale of drawing, but we would include them. So we would have trash, recycling, you know, whatever the city standard is or procedures for that collection. We would have drinking fountains. We would have park benches. Some of these park, we do the doggy bag dispensers. So yeah, we also are required to have bike racks per the green building code, and then we're also going to be required when we get to building this, charging stations for cars too. So yeah, there's a lot of details that aren't showing up in the plan that will be included. The other thing too is I didn't mention it, but we would also have park signs, and we were thinking that the park signs would go essentially in the 4 corners. Since this is a large park and you can access it from a lot of different directions. So we were thinking the 4 corners could work for park signs too.
real quick follow-up question. Is the trash maintenance also included in the overall maintenance budget?
So yeah, that would be included in the maintenance budget. And in addition to what Derek mentioned, we'd also be looking for organics receptacles in kind of the picnic areas to keep those organics out of the landfill as well. But it would be, our maintenance staff would do the emptying of the trash typically in our parks. And then the ultimate collection is by green waste through our franchise agreement.
So I have some additional questions if I can continue then. What would be the expected park hours? And the reason I ask that is because how do we intend to deal with or prevent vandalism or these park to become a teen hangout after past closing hours? Or additionally of that nature, skateboarding hasn't been mentioned, but and I know there's a lot of no skateboarding issues. Can you mention what the thoughts are thus far on skateboarding? I'm not pro or con, I'm just trying to get some clarity on that aspect. Thank you.
Okay. So per the municipal code, the hours are set for daytime hours. I should have them off the top of my head, but there's an opening time for the parks, like 7 or 8 o'clock or something like that. And then it's like a half hour after sunset or something like that. The night hours, it's not open to the public. There's options for lighting in these that they're sports field related, but also at night, we'd be looking at putting basically safety lighting in there, just to make sure that as the police drive by, they can see down in there and see if there's anybody in there. Nothing too bright. That's going to be kind of a light trespass into the neighborhoods, which are going to be kind of uphill and across those the green parkways. So they're separated quite a bit from the park, but typically, it's subject to patrol as the police come by, and anything that the public reports is kind of how we handle our parks.
And then if you can talk about skateboarding, what the thoughts are.
I'm not familiar enough with the skateboard regulations in the city. I haven't heard that they're prohibited necessarily in the parks. We do have a skate park. They may be prohibited in parks. I'm not sure. Someday we'll have a recreation director to help me with these things, and we'll have answers for that. But I'd have to look into the follow up with you and the commissioners as to if there is anything on the books for municipal code regulations on their use.
New topic is this currently is unused area, and if we're going to introduce a fair amount of attendance to this, how is traffic planned to be handled properly? And then secondly, public transportation to this destination.
Okay. So the Dunes Park is part of the University Villages specific plan, which is we now call the Dunes development. And as that specific plan was put together, this use, along with all the development for the commercial and residential uses in that development, were analyzed for traffic impacts. So that was included in the mitigation projects that were identified through that development's environmental document. And those have been incorporated into our impact fee program to fund projects to mitigate that. Some of those projects will actually be direct developer construction of those mitigations, but those were accounted for in that specific planning process. As far as transportation, public transit, there are MST stops. Currently, I believe there's one at the intersection of 9th and 2nd. And what the future holds for regional transportation is the multimodal corridor, which goes from the Salinas Transit Hub to what MST is planning for the intersection of 1st Avenue and 5th Street. just to the west of this park. So there's going to be a major transportation transfer station there for commuter or users of the bus system. So there will be bus stops nearby, as well as for some of the longer distance bus routes will be um, just on the other side of the development off of First Avenue.
Thank you. And then my last question is the Fortag Trail. Why is that included to go through the park? It seems that it might cause, I mean, they seem to be different aspects or different intents.
Well, it was part of the environmental document that was circulated for the Fortag Trail. My understanding is they're trying to make it a regional trail system and connect um, different locations of public interest, and that's why it went through the park here. You know, gives people access by that trail to the sports facilities at this park, and it was part of what was planned for Fortag coming through here.
So I understand now it's a convenient way to ride bicycles to attend the park.
It could be used for that, yes.
Thank you.
My takeaway so far is it seems to me that the biggest objective that we can forward to the city council is which one of these options. And it's kind of interesting looking at the voting because 35 for option one tells me anyway, it's more of a historical crowd, maybe don't have kids and, more retirement type people. And option three for sure are the coaches and families that have kids that want their kids to be involved with sports. And being a resident of Marina since 1992 and raising 3 kids in Marina, I know what a challenge that was for years and years, finding field space, not only for Marina Pony baseball, but for the high schools and so forth. And so, in terms of the public opinion, there's what, 20,000 plus residents in Marina, and we've got the input of less than 150. So to what degree is this a fair representation of what the city's really looking for?
Well, I guess I'll only speak from experience. It's not, it hasn't been put out to the vote of the public per se as in kind of a ballot type measure. There's been the input that was tabulated there was from the January outreach. There was other outreach efforts going back to 2017 timeframe when we started revitalizing the parks planning process. There was public input at that point, public input at the Recreation and Cultural Services and Public Works Commission of options coming forward, as well as presentations at City Council. And that's the more recent stuff. The Parks and Rec Master Plan went through a public input process when it was first put together, as well as the Dunes specific plan. So that's fairly typical. I mean, I think of these things as they develop and come along. There are, multiple opportunities for the public to input on it. And I don't envy your position or the council's position. I mean, it's you're trying to discern among the comments that come in from the people that do participate.
Yes, I'm wondering what relationship the development of this specific park has to do with the master parks and recreation plan, and what in a master plan, what kind of activities were identified that were needed for this facility.
So in the parks master plan, as well as the Dune specific plan, I think that the options 3 and 4 kind of incorporate more of the sports fields. I think that were envisioned for this site itself. I believe I recall there was an amphitheater as an option in the Dunes specific plan. So that's why these have come forward with the sports fields in them. At this time, I think there's been a lot of interest in the community in preserving trees as well. So, grading this site flat, to do fields, it's not really totally flat, but wherever the fields are, the farther you go into that, you're impacting the trees. And then the other thing that the consultant looked at is, how much retaining wall we're gonna need, to construct with the different options. So, I'd say the master plans envision some sort of sports play facilities here. Um, yeah, no, I'm kicking myself, Derek. We had that one in there. Because we had that recently, we looked at it, for there, but I think it was fairly close on the number of fields that were envisioned in the University Village Dunes specific plan. Closer to options 3 and 4.
If we end up with an option like 3 or 4 and we have these fields, who will be responsible for use? So there'll be several organizations that will want to use those fields, ranging from youth to adults that want to play soccer or softball or soccer, or maybe ultimate frisbee, what have you. How will that be prioritized?
So that, as with our parks now, that would be through our recreation department. And whoever's using the fields would coordinate that with the recreation department so that we know we don't have conflicting uses on any given day. They can manage that scheduling.
So you had mentioned the price tag, the various price tags based on the options, and it is a significant investment. How much of the funding currently exists for these to go forward?
So, let me grab that.
I don't need it particular dollars, but ultimately, would it become at risk of not being able to be properly funded as estimated?
So that's one of the big challenges that the city council is going to be tackling coming up as we go into our next budget cycle. There's money from land sales and blight removal bonds, as well as other sources that city council is going to be considering. This particular park has a developer commitment of $8.4 million that they will be paying to the city for development of the park as part of their development agreement. So that's 8.4 million of that coming into the city. Also, as the city develops the developments like the dunes, the Sea Haven, they're paying impact fees every time they pull a building permit, and a portion of those fees go into our parks impact fund. So any new features, this is a new park, it's eligible for those park impact funds. So it's just a matter of, how much we've collected and where city council wants to allocate that within the parks that are planned coming forward. And so, yeah, it's starting, we're presenting this for hopefully ultimately a selection of a option. And the park is also going through a master planning process. So it's not necessarily that the entire park has to be developed at once, but that as long as the plans are developed to a certain level, as different elements, as funding becomes available, it could conceivably be phased. And then the future phases ultimately will come together in the full park as envisioned.
So, if the developer were to present approximately 1/3 of it, how close from what you're aware of, are we halfway there, including the developers, roughly 1/3? Round figures, are we 3/4?
I think with the money that's available in the impact fee program now, I'd say we're at least halfway there. You know, but then again, like I said, not included in this is a sports center, aquatic center, sports pavilion, other parks that would the city council would consider at the budgeting time. So um, staff will be working on that over the next 2-3 months with city council. And you know, one of my announcements towards the end, I was going to let the commission know that we're going to have a number of meetings over the next 2-3 months as well to go over the budget items as the city council works towards approval of the next 2-year budget. So these are things that staff is going to be wrestling with and presenting with council and working through with them over the next couple months. And it will come back to this commission as to funding for all the various elements in the capital improvement program.
So optimistically or realistically, would we be able to expect 50%, 75%, or 100% funding? I'm not looking for a fine point. I'm just looking for one of those.
I'm gonna have to defer that over the next few months because, you know, I could say one thing, but ultimately it comes down to what council actually appropriates to the project. So we will get more clarity of that over the next few months.
Wonderful. Thank you.
If no more questions, you have public here. If you want to open it up to comments and questions from the public that are attending, and
Why don't we open it up for questions and comments from the public? Any members from the public like to voice an opinion? Now would be the time. Step up to the microphone. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah.
I think that is a yes.
My name is Mike Kennedy, a resident of Marina. My question, I guess it was for you, Derek. On option one, you have a great lawn. What is the difference between the great lawn and the rest of the surrounding area?
It was just meant to be an open space, informal, grass and, essentially not programmed. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess with the great lawn, that's grass. But outside the great lawn oval, what is that just gonna be dirt?
Could have plantings, could be mulch. Yeah,
Okay,
we were just trying to create a space where you could have a lawn, you know, for picnicking, informal recreation. Not really set up for sports use. It's, you know, probably not the right footprint. And then, but the space around it was just meant to be open space.
okay, so it'll look like open space in the rest of Marina, just dirt. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
dirt or mulch, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Started the timer.
Hello, my name is Carrie Burley. I'm part of the sports raised group. I guess my question is for option one. We gave kind of a broad price for what it would cost in a budget. But on option one, we have a huge grass area versus the fields that are turf. I have to believe that we all know that that grass area would cost a lot more to maintain moving forward. So I'm just curious, I know it was asked in the previous meeting, have we priced that out?
We didn't look at water use cost. Brian had mentioned the maintenance cost.
But there is a difference between those options, correct? With the grass.
Yeah, well, synthetic turf AstroTurf is like Xerox, right? So it's just one brand, but
So I guess what I'm asking is, what's the maintenance with turf? Because There, I know there is, yeah, there is some versus what it would be to keep the grass field grass. Because in Marina, grass doesn't stay a grass field.
Yeah, there is maintenance with synthetic turf and typically more sweeping with a sweeper that's picks up debris on the surface, and then there's grooming for the infill. So there is maintenance. It's generally about a third less or even more, maybe a quarter of what the cost would be if it was natural grass.
Okay, so I guess my point is to point out that while we look at the first picture of prices and everything, that's daunting, but there is a long-term cost to option one that we need to take into consideration.
Hello, commissioners and staff and design people. Please don't start that clock because I've got a few questions and comments. I was so bummed when you mentioned the clock. So first, I'm going to start by saying the less inclined sports people prefer option 2. I think it would have been better had it said the physically active and recreation oriented people and families who want to see trees preserved and enjoy sports not dependent on turf prefer option 2. So comments and questions. Options 1 and 2 keep the amphitheater with seating for 240 people. Carmel has an outdoor theater that has seating for 540 people. It is a very popular outdoor amphitheater. I've attended many plays and music events there. And I like 1 and 2, where the amphitheater is in the southwest corner because it allows for wonderful views. And it also works with the elevation up in that corner for the amphitheater. The photos in the staff report show children playing amongst mature trees. There's 6 legacy and 21 significant trees. I'm going to speak for our former Marina resident and Public Works resident, Mike Owen, and try not to get too choked up here. Replacement trees do not mitigate the irreplaceable value and size of the existing trees that are there on the site. I'm happy to hear about separate tennis and pickleball courts. I would urge you and recommend that you send to the council a recommendation that there be 4 pickleball courts. Pickleball is a very social activity. I play at a couple of different public courts and a private club, and there are often at least 4 courts with people waiting to play pickleball. And sometimes at Chamisal, there can be 8 courts actively being used. So I would recommend a minimum of 4 pickleball courts. The sports pavilion, there's a $3.5 million price tag on the sports pavilion. I would ask you to consider sending a recommendation to the council that the sports pavilion be removed. If you have not heard during the past year, I allowed a lot of voices from residents asking for that sports pavilion. It requires parking needs, and if you can remove the sports pavilion, you can also reduce some parking. And by removing that sports pavilion, you would bring option 2 down to 20.3 million. Dang it. Thank you, Steve. Steve Parks is a pickleball resident. Do I have a few more minutes? Oh, thank you. Preston Park and Los Arboles Sports Center. I hope that you'll send a recommendation to the city council to be looking at the costs of making sure those sports fields are being well cared for and brought up to the condition they need to be to meet the needs of the children and ball fields and soccer. Maintenance costs, if you were to, again, maybe remove the sports pavilion, how does that impact overall maintenance costs that Brian had mentioned at $360,000 a year? The sports lights that are being called for the outdoor fields, how are they being designed to minimize overthrow to residential neighborhoods? Will the park be accessing reclaimed water from Monterey One Water's reclaimed project? I would assume for the non-synthetic turf area, it would be. And finally, what is the lifespan of artificial turf? That was one of the arguments used not to use artificial turf at the Martin Luther King statuary at the library, that the synthetic turf does not have a long lifespan. So it should be factored into the overall cost of maintenance for the park. Thank you very much.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Leslie Asher. I live in the dunes here in Marina, retired down here close to 5 years ago. One of my dreams of retiring here has been to play tennis on some nice courts and well-maintained courts. I haven't found them in Marina yet, so I've been driving into Monterey to take lessons and to play tennis. I think it's great that the city is taking steps to accommodate the newer popular sport of pickleball, and I think that would be a great idea, as Grace has suggested, to have dedicated pickleball courts. It'd be good if we could then maintain the couple of tennis courts also that are in the plans. Hopeful to have dedicated pickleball courts and dedicated tennis courts would be to avoid striping for both on the same courts, which can be confusing, and avoid having them used that way, where like pickleball right next to tennis courts, where balls from one game get hit into the courts of the other game and so on. So there would be a few details then to consider, like how to provide for pickleball courts plus a couple of tennis ball courts, which really would be nice. If the pavilion isn't built, maybe that space could be built for more courts, or otherwise build tennis courts and pickleball courts near one another, but with fencing in between. But anyway, that's and to draw a quick analogy, we may remember the baseball field, a film, Field of Dreams. It may be a fantasy, but I think if we build more ball courts, pickleball courts, tennis ball courts, if we build it, maybe they'll come. Thanks.
So I guess I just wanted to address the sports part of everything. I don't know if it's known. Marina Soccer has been here for 40 years. It's one of the biggest, oldest mom pop recreational groups that's still in California. We currently had, this last season, we had 458 players ranging from 3 years old to 17 years old. With that came injuries. The field use that we had, since I've been with Marina Soccer for 10 years, we've moved to that we're at our fourth site. It started Gloria Jean Tate. We were lucky enough to have CSUMB for a little bit. And then we had Marina High and Los Arboles. And the past 2 years, we've had Marina Vista and Los Arboles. Previous years, we've had to call off games because the field was marked unsafe. It was shut down actually by the referees league that deemed it unsafe and unplayable for our players. That's not only our 400 kids, that was the high school, that was the middle school, all had to stop playing because the field was deemed unsafe. This year at Marina Vista, and the school district has been very supportive. We had multiple injuries from the gopher holes. We actually had a board member sprain her ankle when she was just walking. And it's become unsafe sorry, I'm trying to speed it up. Pony this year and last year, they boomed with kids wanting to come out and play. Great. I had my 11-year-old have to wait for her game until 8 o'clock on a school night because the high school had to play on Los Arboles field, and then they're trying to fit all these players in. This year, we're fighting for the fields well, not fighting, we all want everybody out there, but there are so many kids that want to play. The league actually had to turn kids away because they cannot house them. We don't have the fields. Between Los Arboles, we have the high school that has to play and practice on that field. We have, I'm quoting right now, pre-rookie has 3 teams, I believe. Rookie has 2 teams. There's a minors team and a majors team that we're all trying to fit on these fields, and it's not working. It's not. We need more fields in the city. The Preston Park is a nightmare. The parking right now, they have 2 games going on right now, and there's no parking for even the residents right now. I don't know how you expect to fit more in. And I just don't think that that's the alternative that we need. Thank you. Sorry.
Commissioner, staff. I'm not a sports guy, not a real sports guy. I was on the softball league for a minute. It was a lot of fun. In high school, you'd think I was a football player, but I was actually on the water polo team and the swim team. So I'm really looking forward to a swimming pool coming in there. I'm not against sports, school sports, or anything of that matter, but I really want to see number 2 go because it seems to be the most all-inclusive for everything. You have a 250 seat amphitheater, which I think would be wonderful. Anybody can go to a park. It doesn't matter what your age is or what your sport you're into or what your abilities are. Anybody can go see a play or a concert in the park. And I think sacrificing down to 80 seats is kind of unfair advantage. I do feel for the youth sports teams because I do visit these sports fields. I do see that they do have some issues. I think some of those things can be remedied. I understand that we have gophers in Marina and all sorts of little, critters that like to drill holes in the ground. I mean, that's where we live. That's maybe those can be converted to astroturf or something. Those existing grass fields. So I think maybe the people that are against our existing fields maybe just don't like them because they don't, the safety concerns, but I think that could be remedied. And the parking, I don't know what to do about parking. That's something that's gonna be hard to fix, but anyway, I hope that you can look at and give, a little piece for everybody. And not turn that park into a giant sports complex, because I really think that focuses the majority of the park there for one purpose, and that's sports. And I think that's kind of unfair to give the majority of the park to just sports people. And that's all I gotta say. Thank you very much.
I guess it's back to the commissioners. I don't look like we have any more of the public stepping up to speak, so. So the resolution before you is fairly, it basically says that you're receiving a presentation on the 4 options and providing input on the design of the proposed Dune City Park. So, any direction you'd like to provide the staff, for direction on the park development, we'll incorporate that as part of the resolution and bring that forward to city council.
Are you asking us to select one of these options right now?
I'm not asking you to select an option. I'm just asking you to provide input on it. If the commissioners are inclined to recommend an option, that will definitely.
I appreciate that because I for one, appreciate all the words that I heard. I know some of you people, I'd like to talk to the gentleman that, Scott, did you say your name was? Mike, I thought you might have said Scott, sorry. I too am a swimmer and water polo player, so kind of that 1% or less than 1%, so we have something to talk about for sure. Yeah, there's not too many of us in Marina, that's for sure. I thought I was the only one. But one thing that's clear is, and I like actually what Mike said about all inclusive, and I agree that options 3 and 4 do kind of appear as very sports oriented. Carrie, God bless you, believe me, I was a coach, Marina Pony Baseball. I managed Mustang for, I don't know, 4 years on the board. I dealt with the parents and in the fields, and I was the guy after the rains that was out in the truck, and a pump, getting rid of all of the puddles so the kids could play. And God knows those fields are terrible in terms of safety. They've got potholes. My dog almost broke a leg chasing a frisbee out there just a couple of days ago at Los Arboles, quite frankly. So what I would like to do, it seems like we have all of this space and there are 4 options. And if we could maybe start with a couple of those options, kind of eliminate a couple and then create some sort of a hybrid that maybe solves all the problems. We've got the trees that are important. We've got the tennis courts that are important. The pickleball I can totally relate to. I met Grace playing pickleball, and it's growing. I mean, it's coming. It's not even here yet, quite frankly. It's amazing the groundswell momentum that sport has right now. And it's not just us old people. It's a lot of young people too. And so it's going to have a high demand. And it doesn't require the skill or the joints that you need for tennis, that's for sure. Or a backhand. There is, but it's a lot harder in tennis. So I, for one, would this is our first meeting, we'll kind of be hit with this all at once. And it's a lot. I had my predisposed ideas because I went through the information before the meeting and I kind of had a direction that I wanted to go. I'm not so sure I want to go in that direction right now. So that said, what do we have to do to, it kills me to say this because one of the things that drives me nuts around here with our city council is things being tabled for forever and ever. But this, I think, is really important because it's making a statement of not who is Marina, but who do we want to be? Who we used to be the pastor. For those of you that lived here for years and years and years, we were the redheaded stepchild of the peninsula. We're now, a destination. People from Carmel Highlands, Carmel Valley, Monterey, they're coming to our stores and eating in our restaurants now. They never did that before. And I imagine they'll frequent some of these facilities once they're built. But, I think there's a lot at stake. And, you know, the solutions, if we were to pick a solution, the way they're presented right now, just the small group we're here, somebody's gonna be disappointed. And so in the spirit of trying to make something that's, I haven't heard any representation from the bocce ball people or the, you know, the volleyball people. Are there some elements of these parks that maybe could be removed in lieu of something else that would be more popular, like tennis courts and pickleball courts, for example? I can tell you right now that the pickleball courts will in fact be very, very popular. There's a group that plays on one court here in Marina, and we'll get up to 18 players. And so only 4 people can play at a time. That means, you know, 12, 14 players waiting their turn to play again. And it's very social, like Grace alluded to, and I think it'll be good for the city. So that's kind of my more than 2 cents.
I guess, let me make some comments about the various options. You know, I think trying to, in options 3 and 4, the limitations of the site and the locations of trees which need to be preserved makes it really necessary to plunk all those sports courts right in the very center of the site. This has a problem in terms of how I see the site development here, in that it divides the other uses apart from one another. And I think, you know, picnic and bocce ball and pickleball courts ought to be located kind of together as a social area instead of dividing them all over the site because of the needs of placing huge, rather fairly large sports courts right in the center of the site, where it's, you know, more level and you can avoid some trees. With the understanding of a desire really to get some athletic fields on this site, I certainly am leaning to option number 2. And one thing option number 2 allows you to push the sports courts into the corner of the site between the trees and allows the concentration of the social picnic and other activities on the other, you know, side of the site, all in one location together. Certainly the site has enough area that rather than having a large lawn area that, you know, will be, if it isn't put it in bark chips or synthetic turf is going to be a maintenance headache. So I'd originally leaned toward option number 1, but I do see a lot of advantages as number 2. Number 2 allows the large amphitheater tucked up against the corner of the site at the highest elevation. It allows the trail through the site to not be in a narrow corridor between the buildings and the sports courts, but allows it to associate with a lot of activities. And I see a lot of people coming along this trail and be induced to join spontaneous activities along this rec trail. Another thing I think with option 2, the sports center, if that could be eliminated, and I think that's probably a good idea, is the parking could be extended into where that sports center is. And I think with reduced parking demands because of the pavilion being eliminated, the parking, which would be on the, let me see, on the west and the north sides of the site could be eliminated and expand the park. And we get all the parking, you know, basically into one area, which would which would be near the swimming pool and the well, where the roller hockey rink is. Those are my comments. And I hope we could pass on a recommendation to city council at this meeting.
So, it's difficult to make a decision, as Mr. Hunt had mentioned, this is the first meeting of our group. I don't have sufficient background because all the good input from the public. Trying to make this one facility be all things to all people is challenging. And I don't have a background or understanding of what other facilities are available. The one gentleman had said, gee, Marina doesn't actually have tennis facilities, but we do have some soccer facilities. However, the soccer facilities that we have are overcrowded and not in good condition that they're practical to be used. Option number 3 and number 4 are more sports oriented, and they would address those issues at the expense of some of the other public concerns for less sports oriented activities. I would try to balance the use of space and the number of people that can use them. For example, tennis courts are fairly large amount of space required for 2 to 4 people to play. Where baseball court or soccer court would certainly be a lot more dense for a number of people that get to participate. But if there are no tennis courts, it's hard to say, gee, the most dense is the most reasonable. If there is no other option for amphitheater, how often would that be used? When it's used, it would certainly have it could have the potential of having a large number of people. And then what could it be used for when it's not having plays or other productions? And I'm not clear on, I like the idea of the productions, but I don't know who would be responsible for bringing those productions into this area and making that happen. So on that basis, I would vote for the more sports oriented, as there is youth demand and adult demand for pickleball and soccer fields, and certainly some baseball and softball fields for various youth and adults. What would be next steps?
No, actually, I don't know if you have the basis for, sort of some sort of resolution or recommendation that can maybe can combine some of the comments that you've had. And, even if it's general direction, maybe it's not necessarily specific to one option, but I'm hearing, kind of a mix, some provision for sports fields, and trying to have a variety of recreation opportunities in the site.
So where we're at, it seems to me that we, based on what I've heard from my fellow commissioners and my own opinion, that options 1 and 4 are not as interesting to us as maybe 2 and 3. So we would like to, would it make sense for us to have a resolution that says something to the city council that we have narrowed down the options to 2 and 3, and we want to try to work within those options to come up with a plan that would better satisfy the needs of the overall community. Do I need to state that into a resolution
Are
or
you-
something?
are you-
first or
I guess
second?
you would make a motion.
So I'd like to make a motion that we discount or drop options 1 and 4, and we pass options 2 and 3 up to the city council for consideration to work some sort of a hybrid that includes more of the park elements that these people have brought to our attention. So and I really, we haven't spent a lot of time on the renovated sports center, the sports pavilion. I really don't even know what those are and what they mean, what they do. Do they, they're not necessary. One idea was to remove the sports pavilion, whatever space can be freed. My motion has just gone to whatever. but This is why I don't want to be the chair. I can think, I just can't speak.
I stopped minutes ago.
Thank you. Gentlemen, why don't you please make a motion and then I'll second it.
Well,
I want to have a little more discussion before I'm prepared to second your motion. If option 3, has a fairly large area devoted to the sports fields. If there was some way that this could be more tucked into I guess all these drawings, north is to the top of the drawing. Is that correct?
north to the right, yes.
North. Okay, well, Second Avenue is to the west, right?
To the
Seventh
east,
Avenue,
to the east.
It runs north-south.
oh, boy, this is so
No.
much clearer.
That's not gonna be on Zoom anyways, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, okay, Second Avenue here. I guess I would like to see somehow is any activities or picnic areas that are on the let's see, they're on the southeast part of the site be moved over to the northeast or northwest part of the site, and that the sports center be moved as far into the corner as you can, up into those trees, as close to those trees as you can, and get all the facilities that are proposed in options 3 and 4 to move those over closer to where the chapel community building would be located, and concentrate to the extent you can the recreation activities on the west side of the site. Well, west and toward towards Second Avenue in that area. So that we could get as many of the social activities together and move the sports courts or sports fields away. If that could be, if something along those lines could be included into your motion, I would second. Okay. Let me move to this.
Yeah,
May I move to
go ahead.
this and show what I intend to Make a motion.
You want option 3? Is that what we're looking at?
It's,
Well, I'm looking at an option 2. When I
Oh.
base my recommendation.
If you want to go to the screen, you can see it on, I just put it on the screen. If that helps.
Now, this is a landmark tree, you know, we'd certainly like to see that preserved and have the amphitheater in this area. I think it would be best to have the sports fields dominate this corner of the site. And to the extent we can have this area, go to alternate recreation areas, inclusive play, watching ball, pickleball. I'm a tennis player myself. I play pickleball. No, I certainly see the advantage of an activity at this site, which involves more people and not so land intensive. I would have to give up tennis courts, pickleball courts, basketball courts, beach volleyball, the amphitheater in that area. These things I think should be sacrificed to an objective to have large sports complexes, sports field complexes. And I think that eliminating this parking area, and put additional parking in this area, maybe sacrificing the sports pavilion, somehow moving the sports pavilion in this area would be better solution from site development. There's some feedback. Why? I guess that wasn't really in the form of a motion, but.
it sounds like an alternative motion to what's already been
Okay, I
proposed.
guess that's an alternative motion yeah, that is my motion to develop the site as I described.
So there's been an initial motion, no second, a second motion, no second.
So the motion is that's on the table, right? And option 2, we kind of move some things and possibly make room for more tennis courts or whatever park elements that could be included in the space that we have. Is that correct? So kind of reconfigure where everything's located, and then if there's room to try to include some of those elements that were in 3 and 4 at all times.
I do think that elements of option 2 and 3 could be incorporated together. A larger sports facility or athletic fields could be developed in this area. But that the facility be moved as far to that corner as possible, as basically is shown in option 2, and expand the other activities in the area as I described it there. It would be on the west and north sides of the site. That's where the concentration of I would say active play areas that are not associated with the sports courts.
Our consultant, that's worked on those options. I guess he has something he could speak to the options. I'm not sure. And I don't know if it'll help move things along on your motions, but we'll see.
We're trying. We are.
So,
Okay, may I try again? Can you put option 3 on? okay, we do have, what I'm saying is whatever we develop, if we try to move that, we take these activities out of here and move the sports groups to the extent we can into this area. And concentrate the other picnic and sports activities that are more of a social as opposed to a club activity or a spontaneous activity would be concentrated in this area. And we could get more of these sports field activities into the project, if we can eliminate this parking area, perhaps this area. I do think we should have street parking. That would be fairly efficient for this parking if we need more parking. Put it here. That's my motion.
So if I could chime in for a minute, this is a complicated site, and I think that we've given you 4 options. And we took a lot of time trying to get this configured. This is, this is the puzzle. So there really isn't the ability to move the fields around without affecting trees. So the fields are precisely located to, in option 3 specifically, to retain more trees. Option 4, that's going the other way, right? That's taking more trees out. But if the fields were to move to the south or to the left side, that would be considerable cost for grading and retaining walls. That's where the slope is. So we're trying to fit smaller programs in that area that have a smaller footprint that'll be easier to construct in there. And so that's what you have in options 3 and 4. There really is no ability to move the design as it is in option 3 and 4 with those field sizes to the south. They really need to stay where they are. If anything, we'd actually want to go the other way and go toward the buildings. But we did the kind of the promenade option there with more informal activities there along the edge. The parking needs to remain. We can't eliminate any parking. Maybe if we take the pavilion away, we can add parking, but I think we're short on parking as it is. That's option 4. I would try to add more parking. These buildings, the aquatic center, the rec center, they're gonna fill up. We're not even including in our counts that the parking lot around the buildings that are being done specifically for the buildings, and that's going to have a lot of use besides what we're doing in the park. So our parking demand we're showing is that we're short on the activities just for the park based on our parking count. So I would not eliminate any parking. You could phase the parking. We definitely want to promote the use of the Fortag Trail and alternative means to get to this park. It'd be great, but the reality is we can't adjust the parking. And then again, those parking areas are in some pretty steep terrain there as well. And we're going to do some retaining walls around those parking lots. So my point is we really can't move things around. We can move maybe the tennis courts, to one area, or the volleyball around, those types of things, but the fields are not going to be able to be moved without affecting trees or really increasing the construction cost on the project.
Could you tell us just real quick, I think this might help us get to a conclusion, but we haven't spent any time that I can recall talking about if we kept the sports pavilion, what that would yield. And we have a renovated indoor swimming pool and a renovated sports center. And as quick as possible, what are the benefits of all of these projects? What sports, I guess?
So we have not been involved with the building work for the renovation to create like the rec center, the aquatic center, and the sports pavilion. That's been completed by the architect, another team. We have not been involved in that. Our work has really just been the park side. So maybe Brian can talk to the buildings.
Yeah, I know the buildings are in architectural design right now. They've been through a few public meetings, city council meetings. During the COVID time, I think we had one of our last presentations just before the COVID lockdown, but we did advance those under direction from the city council and in conjunction with the Sports Aquatic Center and Sports Pavilion, there's been going along hand in hand is an operational study analysis of the cost of operating those facilities and maintaining those facilities going forward. So I think there's been quite a bit of public input on moving in that direction.
Do we know what's the difference between the sports pavilion and the sports center?
So the sports pavilion is for it's a covered, it's not a fully enclosed type of building. So it has the overhead cover, but it's designed around, it's going to be big enough for, say, a roller hockey use, but it's not restricted to specifically roller hockey. It's any type of use or recreation or public gathering use that could make use of the public of a sports pavilion. And
The sports center?
And then the sports center is intended to be more of a multi-use use. There's basketball courts, weightlifting, aerobics class space, that type of stuff that you would see when you go to more of a typical gym. Yeah, I don't know if you've been to the sports center in Monterey, more along that line.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the city council consider options 2 and 3. And I would like to see the sports pavilion eliminated because one, the cost of that will bring down the over cost considerably of the project for either option. And 2, it will also reduce significantly the maintenance. And that's my motion.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any comments from the commissioners on the motion? Would the chair like to call for a vote?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. I didn't give him enough time. We have 3 ayes.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hunt. I knew our architect wasn't going to make life easier for you when he stepped up here because it is a pretty complicated site and we're trying to fit as much as we can in there. So, but and you're correct in that this is a pretty tough subject for you to have on your first time up the bat here. So. So that recommendation will go on to City Council next Tuesday. And then the next item is commissioners and staff informational reports. I don't know if you haven't really had any commissioner activity unless you want to report on what you did during COVID.
None to report.
As I mentioned earlier, we anticipate that there will be a number of Public Works Commission meetings over the next 2-3 months as we're working towards the budget. It tends to be a busy time for the Public Works Commission, so look forward to meetings in April, May, and June probably. And I guess, it was mentioned, I don't know if I defer the commissioners, but if you wanted to close the meeting in memory of Mike Owens, who was a Public Works Commissioner, up until his passing, so.
Mike Owen is the reason all 3 of us are up here. He talked to all of us at different stages of the game, and we're all here and he's not. And before the meeting started, we were all introducing ourselves to each other, and I made the comment that Mike's up there looking down on us going, gotcha. So anyway, God bless Mike, and certainly he will be missed, and he would be the perfect person to chair this committee going forward. So in his absence, I'm not happy he's not here for that reason and many others. So God bless him. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.